and welcome to another episode of Talk'n TRM. My name is bex.deadman, or also known as Travel Risk Bex. I think this is about our 8th or 9th episode now, so I'm really, really excited that we're getting into the flow of things, and unfortunately, we don't seem to have any shortage of guests to come and talk about this subject. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our special guest today. A good friend of mine. We've been friends for a while now, and I'll go into how we met in a moment, as is my way. But I'd like to introduce everybody listening and watching to the wonderful Axel Wochinger. And I've just done that wrong.
Okay.
We'll carry on because basically everyone who's listening, I tried to pronounce that 2 seconds before, did get it right, and I knew as I started talking I get it wrong again. Axel, please, will you do it for our listeners properly?
Axel Wochinger.
Thank you. I did it absolutely perfect off audio. Axel Wochinger. Thank you, Axel. I apologise. I'm just terrible. And I get nervous with names. It's one of my little things. Anyway, so we met when I was working at Blue Cube, and we were looking for travel risk management partner of some description. And you, as the result group, we found you. And I think we found you, actually, I recall, because you'd been helping one of our clients. And they were so amazed with what you'd done and how you'd helped them out that they then introduced you to us. So it was a really good, it doesn't get much better than that kind of introduction, does it really? So we actually then partnered with you at the time. So I'm sure it's still going on, but I'm out of that world now. But that's how long we've known each other. And then you very kindly got involved in the BSI group that's developing the standard for the travel service providers. And one of your colleagues, Renee, has obviously stepped into that too. So it's been a little while. And we met up recently in Richmond as well, which was really nice, just to keep this real. It's not always online. Now and again, we get to actually have a nice lunch. And it was really good to catch up with you and to kind of give a view of kind of, I guess, what I'm doing in this space, but also what's happened with the result group, obviously, since you took over as the CEO. So enough from me. I'm going to now introduce you, everyone, to Axel. Axel, if you could tell everybody who you are and what it is that you do.
Yes. Thank you, Bex. It's a very great pleasure for me being here, and thanks for the invite. That's very kind. I'm looking very much forward about an interesting conversation over the next couple of minutes. You've introduced myself already. I think we stay with Axel, which is probably the
much easier,
the easier one. As you can hear from my accent, I'm originally Austrian. I work in Germany now, and I'm the CEO of Result Group, which is obviously an English name, but it's a German risk and security management company. We're based near Munich in beautiful south of Germany. And I've been with the company now for more than 6 years, and took over as the CEO about 2 years ago.
You did, just as we were kind of in the middle of a COVID crisis. So
exactly, yes, and that's where we met actually when we were helping one of the Blue Cube clients bring people back home from Latin America in a time where travel obviously was massively impacted by the pandemic in a way that we've probably never seen before.
Absolutely. And do you think, just on that, I think just for our listeners, because there's so many different risk management companies out there, so just for everyone's benefit, whereabouts do you sort of sit? What are some of the services that you guys do?
Yeah, indeed, you're right. There's a lot of them now. And I guess that's true for the UK, but for Germany and many other countries as well. I also think there is a reason for that, because the topic and the awareness to the topic of travel risk management and risk management in general becomes more relevant for corporate decision makers. But what we do is, on one hand, we have our operational branch, which does executive protection, high net worth individual protection, and other operational security services. And the main part is the consulting business, the risk management business, where we support mainly corporates in security and risk management functions. And yeah, I think in the typically broad range from risk assessments, physical security audits. We got a bit into the investigative part now with the background screenings and business partner screenings, which is kind of new, at least here in continental Europe. And yeah, that's pretty much the scope of what we do. So it's pretty wide range. We do it awareness trainings, hostile awareness, hostile environment awareness trainings, security awareness trainings as well. So I guess it's a pretty comprehensive range of services that we provide for quite a nice number of reputable clients.
And that's why I always like to dig into this, I think, because there's just so much more to it. And you didn't even mention the kind of technology piece that holds it all together, which I'm glad you didn't.
Exactly.
Because obviously you have that bit too. But that's not travel risk management, is it? And this is what I keep talking about to corporates all the time. It's great that you've got some sort of tool, but without all the other bits, it doesn't make sense. And that actually comes from the organization as opposed to the company who is helping you support those. And I think this idea of individuals being checked, companies being checked, this idea of due diligence, like this is so big across all standards now. It's something that you should be doing against your sort of technology partners, but certainly from a security and a risk and a anti-bribery, anti-corruption, all of that sort of stuff. It's going across everything. So I would imagine it's going to get a lot bigger for you. And I guess it's good that you were already there in that space, carving out a great reputation.
Yeah. No, that's I agree. And I'm always smiling a bit if people say, well, we have implemented a travel risk management process now. And then when you ask them, what have you done? They tell you, well, we have this kind of technology now, giving us information or providing whatever. And then, well, yeah, it's a part of it, but it's certainly not a travel risk management program that you have implemented just with a bit of technology.
Not at all. Yeah, exactly. It's the solution, but it's part of the solution, but it's not without that bit going in. And no, I agree. And I know we've had long conversations around this over the years, and it's moving that, I think, the risk now from that high risk country, which is obviously where a lot of security companies and risk companies sit, to this idea that actually something can happen at any time, at any place, to anyone. And if you're really looking at putting a travel risk management program together, it's about bringing all of those things together. And have you found companies sort of taking an interest in standard from your side? In Germany, and obviously in the UK it's massive. What's it like?
Of course, I mean, we're looking at mainly the German-speaking market, which is obviously Germany in the center, and then a bit of Switzerland and Austria, which is a market of about 100 million, with very high density of industrial corporations from small size niche players that are all around the world, even they're very small companies or relatively small companies, to the major players in the German stock market that we all know, those very famous brands. What I see, and what I've seen probably even over the last few years, is that the big players, they have pretty comprehensive travel risk management programs. They have their corporate security departments, they have their service providers, they have the technology piece. They have very clear rules on how they do it, when can something be done, what approval is being needed. So that's pretty comprehensive, I would say. But the smaller the companies are, the more they're the medium-sized or even smaller corporations, the less you find. Some of them have taken quite an effort because they operate in high-risk environments, but many others haven't really had a big thought on that. And the main driver why you see change now is, I think, first of all, many companies realize the world is changing. It's more volatile. The situations change quicker, and you can't really predict what's going to happen tomorrow. And the second, I think, main driver being that they understand they have a certain liability towards their employees. I think we all call that the duty of care piece, which obviously drives people to take on this responsibility and finally take action, not to become liable if something goes wrong.
Yeah, and I think in a world where, you know, not only can things go wrong, but they can be publicly wrong so quickly these days.
Exactly.
Your reputation is on the line constantly, isn't it? So it's about liability. Ultimately, we hope it's about companies doing the right thing. I do believe there's people in companies just wanting to do the right thing and look after their people. But
reputation is certainly one aspect of that. And then there's another one that we've seen a couple of times also, that from the employees, from the workforce, there is a certain pressure to do something in the field of travel risk management. People push their management to, let's say, organize a travel risk or travel security training, security awareness trainings, for example. And that's the traveling employees who said, well, we would like to have some more information. We would like to be a bit better prepared. Is there something? And they start, Googling around and trying to find solutions. And then they go to their management and say, hey, listen, there's something what we want to do. So sometimes it's a bottom up, but sometimes also a top down approach. You see really all of that.
Yeah, I think I agree. And I think that bottom up is much more post-pandemic, isn't it? It probably wasn't such a big deal pre-pandemic, but I think so many people have been touched with this in so many different ways that actually they've all thought about it differently. Actually, what does happen when, and what does my insurance actually, what is my insurance and all that other sort of stuff.
And who can I call if I have a problem? And interestingly, I would say the younger the workforce, the bigger the pressure and the higher the awareness of something needs to be done in this field as well. You have those old, this 55-year-old engineers. They travel around the world fixing machines. They've done it for 35 years. They say, what do I need? I've seen the world. I've experienced everything. And it's probably true. Because there has never been such an awareness on their side. But now the younger people, when they join a company, they are more interested into what is being offered in regards to my security when I'm traveling.
I've seen exactly the same thing. I completely concur. And actually almost well, why haven't you got this in place? Kind of, this is an expectation for me to even maybe join a company. So, because actually, I think for me, the travel risk management piece is just the proof of how much you care for your employees, isn't it? Like, this is something you can actually bring into operation, tangible, and prove it. Thank you, Axel. I really, really want to get into the meat of the conversation now. So I'm going to ask you if you would share with us perhaps some of your past or your stories, or what is your why? Why travel risk management for you? What drove you to get into this?
I think the initial background is quite simple. I was, as so many others in this industry, have been serving in the military for more than 12 years, and I was an officer. I was traveling to the various crisis regions at this time, and when I quit, I was eager to stay into a kind of business that deals with security. So that was just the primary goal. And then I as always accidentally fell over a result group. I started as a freelance, and my first project involved travel to as a civilian, travel to Afghanistan and Pakistan. So environments that you would consider as more high risk, especially the Afghanistan piece. But a part of Pakistan that I was traveling to was also more elevated risk. Let's put it this way. And with this, I really got into the topic personally because of my travel and how I prepared and how I was prepared. I mean, we're a smaller company and we're security professionals. So you expect a higher level of independently preparing yourself. But then the core of my first project pretty much was developing security concept for an engineering team that needed to travel to Afghanistan and Pakistan within a larger project, industrial project. And that's why from the very beginning of my work in Result Group, I had to deal with this topic. And then from this point, it really became visible for me that this is something essential, that it's a business case. And that, I think, is the other part of the truth. It's part of our business, and we of course need to generate something out of that. But as always, if you do something just for the profit and for the business, yeah, you can do it, but it's not really fun. But I'm really interested in this topic. We have I do travel quite a bit to interesting places, and that's more or less all related to travel risk management related projects that we have to do for our clients.
And have you ever, I mean, we've talked to this with other partners and stuff that have been on, because I think when we travel ourselves as kind of travel risk professionals, we have a completely kind of different look to things. But I mean with utter respect, you're a security professional. You're ex-military, so you pretty much and you're a man, and you can pretty much kind of take care of yourself. Have you ever sort of experienced or seen kind of where that isn't the case? Perhaps a more vulnerable traveller, or a female traveller in a space where you felt that actually, you know what, the stuff that we put in place for most travellers, for those 55-year-old guys, the engineers that are going on the road, is suitable, but it doesn't feel quite as suitable for everybody. Have you kind of experienced anything like that, or are companies talking to you a bit more about that now too?
Companies certainly have this as a topic, because the workforce is very diverse. So the travel risk solution needs to be diverse as well. There's a difference, certainly, if I travel somewhere versus a female young girl or young woman traveling to, I don't know, somewhere in Central Africa. The risk element is different. It needs to be addressed in a different way. And if your risk management program doesn't really consider that and has adequate solutions, then it has shortfalls. And, so there's certainly a difference. And I mean, even one of those very basic things that everyone says when you travel, just keep a low profile. If I travel to the Democratic Republic of Congo, I can't be low profile, because being blonde and white stick out like, yeah. So there are limits of low profile, obviously.
Yeah.
And your program needs to address these differences and those gaps.
And recognize, I guess, and this is the thing, we talk about destination such a lot, but it's the destination, it's the person, and obviously it's what they're doing when they get there, isn't it? And I was just, as you were talking, the reason I brought it up, and it might sound like I interjected weirdly then, listeners, but in my mind I was thinking, a trip to Afghanistan, a trip to sort of some of the more high risk areas within Pakistan. How would I feel about doing that? And actually, I'd have a whole different host of concerns than yourself. And it kind of made me joke, it made me laugh, because you were like, we're security guys, so we have to do our own kind of stuff. Yes, you do. But it's that stuff, isn't it, that we want actually everyone to know how to do. Because if all companies had a basic level of security training for all of their employees, would we not, as a kind of world, be more proactive and more aware just as to how to kind of look after ourselves? And I just love the kind of the attitude of, well, you guys do this as a living, you'll be fine. But also it's a problem that startups have just generally, isn't it? There's not enough people, money, resource, anything to put all this stuff in place that kind of needs to happen. And I think this is where, if you then go through the whole pattern of how a company evolves, this is why the travel program is never really managed properly from day one, because it's almost it's seen as a means to do something else. Your travel-y bit wasn't the important bit. The important bit was the work that you were doing. And because of who you were, you could look after yourself. But actually, there's lots of people who can't. And I guess that's what this policy is all about. I just love the fact that you kind of wanted to stay within these regions. We had another one of our most popular podcasts, a guy called Jim. He's also ex-military, and he felt the same. But he felt that he went to these countries and like they're actually not as unsafe as people think they are, and actually there's things that can happen, and we can develop this better, which is better for the countries themselves if people just are a little bit more aware. And that was kind of his drive. So it's really cool to hear how you guys, where it all kind of comes from, and what you do.
Yeah, something that is very interesting, as you just mentioned it, is what is the personal perception of the country that you're traveling to, and very often initially you might feel very unsafe in one country because you consider this country to be very dangerous, because you read some stuff in the news, or you have been reading stuff in the news a couple of years ago, but situations might have changed. But then there are other countries which have a very positive connotation in general with our Western culture, but probably the security risk is significantly higher. I mean, take, for example, South Africa, beautiful country. We all love it as a country of doing safari, the Cape Town, the Table Mountain, nice and great red wine. But crime is extremely high, and it doesn't make stop from tourists or business travelers. They might be affected. Mexico, another example, beautiful country, but the crime rates are massive. And it does not just involve only the drug cartels. Yes, that's a big piece of it, but it does affect travelers, business travelers, tourists, and so on. So the personal perception and feelings that you might have, they need to be kind of being brought on a more professional level, where a proper risk assessment is being done, and you get proper information and briefing about where you go and what you can expect there.
With the right intelligence coming from the right people. And no, I agree. And I just want to add to that. I think even we use South Africa obviously as a really good example, of Mexico, but I think there's even areas in the States or in the UK right now, because we're and I can't talk about the rest of Europe because I'm not there, but we're going into sort of recessions. People are desperate. Burglaries and theft is definitely on the rise. And also we have a lot of hate crime, like a huge amount of hate crime here. And also in the States, there's certain areas that if you were a vulnerable traveler, and I always think of the kind of slightly younger generations in this, because I think there's we're also connected now, and I think the younger generations have been born connected on the internet. There's almost an assumption that if you're part of a certain type of community, then yes, you understand some of the risk, but perhaps not all of them. And maybe we think, everyone's talking about going to holiday in Dubai, that's going to be fine. Dubai would be great. Dubai is not great if you're part of the LGBTQI community, and you can go, of course, but you really need to understand how you're going to behave and what you're going to do, and is that an infringement on your rights? Yes, of course, and your right to be who you want to be, but that's just the case of how that country is. And I think that stuff gets missed quite a lot, because there's this assumption that the world's much safer than it is. And one of the reasons the 31030 came into being was that businesses in the UK said, we're really concerned now if there's a high terrorist attack, or if something happens as a sort of lone wolf attack, we're not ready for that, because we're not a high risk destination and we don't know what to do. Hence why the standard kind of became into you've obviously had instances in Germany where companies are going to be affected too. Are companies talking about their staff and understanding those differences and how they've got to kind of think about it? What are some of the extra sort of pressures that are coming through?
Yeah, I think the first moment people or companies talk to you about the travel risk management program, they're very much focused on their overseas travel, like outside of Europe. And they even sometimes want to save some money and say, no, we only need the intelligence piece for Africa, Asia, whatever, Latin America. And it's quite a challenge then to explain them that, listen, the risk of something happening is global. It can happen to you in Berlin. It can happen to you in Munich. It can happen to you in Vienna. It can happen to you in London. There is no difference. There is different risk levels. So the probability piece is maybe changing, and the impact might change. If you're being robbed out somewhere in Berlin as a German, you know how to help yourself. That's something that doesn't really make such a big impact, versus being robbed out in Sao Paulo, Brazil, as a German. The impact might be a different one, also because of the type of crime or the way the crime is being committed. On the one side, someone maybe has a knife. On the other one, someone has a firearm, which both can be very dangerous, of course. But so you really need to explain those clients that you need a global program. You need to look even on those areas that you feel. And again, we're up to this topic of personal perception and individual feelings. You need to get to this point of saying, no matter, it's a global approach that you have to take. Things can happen everywhere and more or less anytime. And so look at it from a bigger perspective.
As a whole, yeah, this is the thing. Like, it's about like almost having this tangible program that you can nearly hold in your hands because you actually understand it so well, and why you're doing it, and all these kind of questions that maybe companies can't answer yet, but they'll be able to.
Yeah. So and very often, just to add that, very often something that you hear is, well, until now we've never had an incident, so we really want to keep only a small footprint with our programs. Well, because something didn't happen yet doesn't mean it will not happen, first of all. And you're fighting against probability, kind of. Sooner or later, something is going to happen. So it's probably a good time to start thinking a little bit more about how you can do it. Not every, and that's something when it's always about the money. How much are you willing to invest? That's non-productive expenses. So I think one important message always is you can put it as a small company or small or medium-sized company. You can put a program together that has a small footprint at moderate expenses. You just need a proper process in place, and some of those core pieces need to be added in order to be kind of comprehensive. But not everyone needs to do what, I don't know, Siemens or Daimler is doing as a large German stock market stock listed company.
And arguably getting those processes and policies and all that stuff in place when you're smaller is a lot easier because you can actually go and have a conversation with the people as to why they travel, what they're doing. When it gets to a huge organization, it's impossible, and it's about just counting the trips and getting them paid as opposed to kind of any thought given as to why they're doing it and that kind of thing. No, I agree. I just want to talk to you forever, Axel, and I'm not allowed to do that. I keep looking at my clock going on my time. I'm like, oh no. So I want to just, I want to use and abuse your knowledge if we can for all of our listeners. And for anyone sort of beginning to start their journey out there, you've just given a little tip, I think, to SMEs that they can start, but I'm going to pull another one out of you. So what's your sort of golden nugget that you would advise anybody who's sort of wanting to get into this space from a corporate angle? Where should they start looking, and what should they do?
I think what is important is a key point of such a program always is you need to know where your people are. So have the information, where does travel happen and where are people. And if you're a large company, you can have that in more automated systems and processes. If it's a smaller one, maybe just one of the assistants has a list of people traveling at this point, and ensure that communication is established. So make sure you have their comms in place, you know how to reach them, and that those people know who they can call in the company or with a service provider. And that needs to be 24/7. So establishing communications is the key piece. And I guess then a certain point of awareness is the second element that needs to be there. And that can be very minor. If you're not traveling to high-risk destinations, a short security briefing or just an intel report that you provide is another core piece. And I think a little bit of information and intel, good awareness with a bit of training probably, and having established communications in both directions. That's kind of, if you have that in place and a decent process that describes that, I would say you're pretty well off.
You're well on the way there. No, and I agree. I think I'm going to obviously jump on the communications piece because I think there's a lot of assumption here. And there's this, we've got email, we've got this, we've got that, but it's actually what happens when the phones go down, what happens if you can't actually reach that person. So what are you doing in that piece? I think it's so important and so under considered. I work with lots of corporates who've got, again, all of the technology in place sort of from almost a tick box level. And there's an assumption that everyone, because there's been, something's gone out about the technology, so everyone therefore should know about it. And there's no sort of due diligence done to actually make sure that people do that training piece, that comms piece, that two-way comms piece. Not only am I telling you this, but do you understand it? And then actually in an emergency, can you get hold of me and can I get hold of you? And I think I just wanted to add, this idea of personal security. And I've talked about this a lot in the different podcasts, but as a female traveler, for me, because that's what I relate to, I don't have an issue with locator services. I think it's a good thing. It's just about how it's positioned to me. There's an issue with companies and travelers not wanting to be tracked right now. If it's positioned to me in the right way, that it's going to protect me and I can switch it on and switch it off according to what I want to do, but I understand why it's there, then I think that it's just been positioned wrong, hasn't it, up until now? We've understood it in the incorrect way.
Yeah.
But I think I just wanted to tie that into the communication piece, because I think it's very easy for a company to go out and go, hey, we've got this app, do this, and then everyone freaks out and goes, you're doing what? I'm not being tracked 24/7, no thanks. So it's about this, it's about making sure you've got the communication and then being able to communicate what it is that you're doing at a wider level.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for everything that you've spoken to about with our listeners, and I hope that they've got lots of good tips from you. Axel's details will appear at the end of the podcast and the YouTube video, as always. If you've got any questions, I'm sure he won't mind speaking to you at all.
Of course.
So thank you so much. And to my listeners, you've been listening to another episode of Talking TRM with Travel Risk Bex. Thank you so much for your dedicated support, and we will be back with you in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you and bye.